The veteran has to learn awareness. What is it that sets you off? Why do you get angry? Instead of why am I always angry? Okay, good. Now, why do you get angry? Talk about the specific moment. Now break it down. If you do that with a spouse, she understands what the husband, their veteran's going through. And when they understand it, they can be more compassionate about maybe what they say or what they do. And we also work with a veteran to be compassionate and be empathetic towards a spouse and the things that they've been doing at home and dealing with, because they both live under stress. They both want the same thing. They're both saying the same story. We just want to live together happily and feel connected.
Welcome to Crossroads. I'm your host, Joshua Philipp. Today we have with us Tom Satterly. He was a command sergeant major with Delta Force. He was in the Battle of Mogadishu, the Black Hawk Down incident. And he's here to talk to us about his new book, and it's All Secure, a Special Operations Soldiers Fight to Survive on the Battlefield and the Home Front. So, Tom, it's a real pleasure having you on Crossroads.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
And you also you're the co-founder with your wife, if I'm right, the All Secure Foundation, which helps veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I co-founded a foundation to help special operations combat warriors and their significant others or spouses recover from the traumas that they've seen in war and help them reconnect as a family.
Right. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about Tom's story, some of the stuff he went through, and how through his own experiences and telling what he went through, he's going to talk to us about how he and his wife now through this organization are helping other guys like him. And so, Tom, why don't you just start by telling us a bit about, I guess, what made you want to join the military, get into, what brought you into Delta Force? And as we all heard, people say Delta Force doesn't exist, but
I'm not
they
here.
made a movie about it, and so we all know about it now, right? That's how it goes. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes I wonder how I'm even here, but I wish I had a better story of why I joined the military and then how I got into Delta. But one of my best friends in high school, when we graduated, he joined the Army and he went off to basic and AIT. And I was continuing on trying some college courses at Indiana University. And he came back from AIT and he had about 2 weeks at home before he shipped off to Germany. And there was a John Cougar concert in Indianapolis that night. So there's nothing more American than John Cougar, Indiana, and joining the military. So on the way up to the concert, he's telling me all about basic training, how great it was, how he's going to Germany and he's going to be there for 2 years. And I'd never traveled anywhere. So to me, at that moment in life, that was one of the most exciting things I'd ever considered. And by the time we got to Indianapolis, about an hour, I had already told him to take me to a MEP station and started the initial paperwork for signing up for the Army. And went home and told my parents about it after the concert that night, and they subsequently freaked out. But, I ended up, that was probably June of 85. So by February of 86, I was in the military and at basic training at Fort Leonard Wood. And I was only going to give 4 years, get some college money, get out and start my life over again. And while I was in Germany, I ended up being in Germany for 3 years, and my platoon sergeant was a former Hungarian sergeant, and he wasn't burnt out like the rest of the platoon sergeants who were kind of Vietnam era at the time. He was a little more motivated, so he took us to French commando school, the Swiss March, which is like a 40-mile hike a day in the Swiss Alps for a week, and then he got a slot to German Ranger School, and I competed with hundreds of people in the battalion and won the slot to German Ranger School. And that gave me a different taste to what I could be doing in the military. So I went ahead and re-enlisted just for jump school to get to Fort Bragg because I wanted to end up being a Green Beret as soon as I could.
Nice.
And so, yeah, so that took me to 89. And so 89 and early 90, I went to SFAS, Special Forces Assessment and Selection, and then the 6-month qualification course to be a Green Beret and passed that. And when I was in language school for Persian Farsi, I was approached by 2 people who were in the Q course with me, and they were from the unit, and I didn't know it. And they pulled me aside and they said, "Hey, we think
you should." That's Delta Force, right? That's what you
right.
call it, the unit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the cool term. And so they said, "Hey, we think you have what it takes. You should try out for the unit." And I'm like, "Okay, what's that? That sounds good." And they kind of described it to me a little bit. Basically, this is the world. This is where we train. This is where we fight. So we go everywhere. And I decided then that was for me and put in for a selection date. So in early 91, went to selection for the unit. I'd been in the military almost 5 years. And I spent 20 years. From that day on, I spent 20 years in the unit before I retired.
And so your first deployment was kind of one of the more intense ones in the history of Delta Force, as far as we know, at least. So tell us about how that went. You were in, of course, the Battle of Mogadishu. If anyone's seen the movie Black Hawk Down, that was the Battle of Mogadishu.
Right. You know, your vision of what combat would be and your motivation to join the military is all recruitment videos, if you will. You know, the military movies you see where the heroes are high-fiving and coming home and everybody's happy until you get PTS and you go through a situation like that. And then you watch the same movies and you pick up on things like, oh, I get it now. he had PTS, and either they knew it or they hid it in the movie. But, you know, so the first 4 or 5 missions in Somalia were like what I thought. You go out, you shoot at the enemy, maybe they shoot at you, maybe it gets close and it's scary, and you get back and you high five and you tell stories about, did you see that guy running or falling down?
Like slow running back into base with like patriotic music in the background and stuff.
And nothing that cool. Nothing that cool, but it was kind of what you consider it to be, you know. Everybody gets back and tells the stories of how cool it was and nobody got hurt. Yeah. And then 3 October was the big wake-up call. And, you know, you go in about 2 in the afternoon, didn't take night vision with us, didn't take extra water. Or typically we're in and out within an hour. And so right before dinner mission kind of thing, I remember joking on target that, you know, I hope we make it back for dinner and things like that. But that turned out to be an 18-hour-long firefight, the longest sustained firefight since Vietnam at the time, and maybe still. But that completely and utterly changed everything for me and everything for the unit and how we even did tactics from that day forward. But, you know, the mission went down pretty cool. Infill was kind of messed up. We were already taking fire, and all the brownout from the dust kind of obscured the ground. So we're fast roping into nothing that we could see and taking fire from all directions. And even then it was exciting, and we're making jokes up until the first helicopter got shot down. Yeah. And I remember it spinning out of control overhead and crashing to the northwest or the northeast of us. And I knew then that things were going to change. I wasn't in charge of anything back then. I was just a young E5 running around breaking things and shooting at people. And I didn't have any responsibility except myself and the guy left and right of me. So that changed when I turned the corner, fighting our way to the crash site. And I saw one of my friends get shot in the head. I didn't know if he was dead or not. And I actually didn't see him get shot. I was looking at him. He started to shoot down the street. I turned, started shooting down the street. Took that target out, and when I looked back at him, kind of like, did you see that? One of those motivated moments again. 2 other friends were dragging him away, and I didn't really know what happened, but at that moment, I knew we weren't invincible. That lie that we told ourselves the whole time, and that's when I realized I'm wearing a plastic Protect skateboard helmet. I took my Kevlar vest and I'd sewn it down to as small as I could. You know, I built my own kit so I could be light and fast. And that's when I realized I wish I had a real helmet. I wish I had bigger Kevlar, because you can't outrun a bullet. And life changed that moment and the rest of the night, as well as moments like that continued to happen over and over again. Losing friends, people slowly dying in front of you. And the enemy kept coming and coming, and there's no end in sight. So you kind of start to give in to the moment and give in to what the rest of your life may look like, albeit it could last another 5 minutes or another 2 hours. I had no idea.
And I know even after that incident, you still served, correct?
I did. That was in 93, and I didn't retire until the end of December of 2010.
And I know for a lot of guys, the coming back is almost just as hard sometimes. I know that's kind of one of the focuses of your work, is helping guys come back to civilian life. What was that like for you when you first came back?
When I first retired, I had no plan as to what I was going to do. You know, I'm going to get a retirement check. I'm going to lay down and go fishing and just have fun. That lasted about 2 days of nothing. I didn't do any of that. And then I got a call for a job. So I took a job in Amman, Jordan, and I packed up and moved and lived there for almost 2 years. And I was training the Jordanian army to be Special Forces qualified for Prince Hashem and King Abdullah. And so I'm living what I was used to, sort of a military life. I had hired 10
Bit of
other.
a soft landing, I guess, right? Yeah.
It was, and I had friends around me and people that were similar. I didn't know a lot of them, but I had to hire 10 other instructors, all special forces qualified. And so you're around a like-minded tribe still, and you're still doing the similar work, yet you're making more money. So the world is all good. And with all that extra money, we started doing all the extra drinking and partying and working hard and playing hard like we did, and it just started taking its toll on me. And then after that 2-year period, I went back home to North Carolina, and I did nothing for about 4 months. I was up all night in bed watching TV, slept all day in bed, just really depressed that I had no mission and no focus in life and what direction I was going to take. And I really started noticing that I was tanking then. It wasn't as much that I started tanking then. That's when I started noticing the issues that I was having.
What were some of the initial, when you realized that you had PTSD, what were some of the initial signs of that? When did you start to realize it?
I didn't really realize it until I almost took my own life. Before, you take those symptoms as culture, as a way of life, the partying, the waking up in the morning and saying, I'm never going to drink again, and until about 2 p.m. when you start to wake up again and you're like, oh, I can't wait till I can start drinking it. Abusing all the medications that they were giving me, hanging out with the same people like me, similar people that were living in the same misery, telling the same war stories over and over again, talking about lost friends. And guys were running around living the lifestyles of rock stars, going out, cheating on your wives, hanging out with the women. And it's that warrior mindset that you kind of see in movies that go all the way back in time to where the warrior just does what he wants. And it's whether it's moral injury that you've suffered or the fact that you feel you're invincible or that, you could lose your life at any moment, so you're going to do what you want. But no matter what you consider that to be, we all have the same symptoms. Everybody's like, well, my combat experience isn't like yours, or, well, I don't have the background you have, but I stop them there. That's just a story of how you got to feel the way you feel. But the more veterans we talk to and the more people we talk to, the symptoms are all so similar that we decided to start the foundation to help people. And it was more for me that the day I almost took my own life, that was the day I kind of woke up the first time. And you think, okay, I'm gonna start now. I'm gonna start Monday. I'm gonna work out tomorrow. And I kind of rolled that over for another maybe year, getting a little help and then falling backwards, getting a little help, falling backwards. And it didn't really take effect till like a year later, really, when I got married, and I almost ruined my marriage on day one. And my wife now said, listen, it's either you start Monday or that's it. And so that Monday on a Friday, I started with anger management therapy and just haven't stopped seeking different modalities to assist with the different ways that I felt that I know is not normal to everyday behavior, and that kind of keeps you off the path that you need to be on. I'd lost empathy, compassion since 93 or around that time frame, and hadn't had it until probably 2 to 3 or 4 years ago. I started gathering empathy, gaining more empathy for people and compassion. Instead of pointing fingers and blaming other people, I started pointing my fingers inward and realized I need to get to work on myself. And once someone reaches down and helps you, that's when you realize how easy it is to help others.
I know one of the big problems guys have is admitting weakness, or showing vulnerability, because you're trained not to show vulnerability, right? That's the whole thing. So.
They hate that word. They hate the word weakness and vulnerability. And I do a lot of reading now. There's a lot of Brene Brown reading, and people will laugh at that. But she takes weakness and vulnerability and changes it to courage. You have to know, and you have to be fearful or afraid that something's going to happen to you to actually muster up courage, right? Getting ready to go out the gate. If that didn't scare you, you would need to muster up the courage to do it. So whether you talk about it or not, you feel that way. And I tell everybody it's not a sign of weakness at all to ask for help. It's a sign of strength to know you need help and to be better. Just like when you can't shoot a weapon or you can't conduct CQB properly, you seek out more training to be better at it. It's the same way with healing. You have to keep at it and continue different modalities and different paths that work for you. So we kind of integrate. It's not healing. We're healing, but it's not mental health healing. It's more like retraining your brain, retraining your muscle memory that you've developed over the last however many years you were in the military, that is as simple as pulling the trigger on your weapon is muscle memory versus a moral decision at the time. Now, well, they beat that thought process out of you and turn it into muscle memory. And so that's when you have to realize once you retire that served its purpose in combat. It doesn't serve its purpose after combat anymore.
Yeah, well, you touched on that in your book. Some of the muscle memory you had developed that when you're living in the civilian world, it is not as necessary, or hopefully never necessary, but affects your life in a lot of different ways. You mentioned, for example, going out with your wife and you're like, scanning restaurants for threats and, people approaching you quickly and you enter like, attack mode kind of. Of course, I mean, that's what guys like you are trained. That's how you're trained to act. That's built into you in a certain way. I guess a lot of guys, they think it's a good thing to be like that. One, what would you tell a guy who thinks like that? And two, how did you decide to start changing these muscle memories?
I tell guys like that think it's good to be like that, or the ones that continue like that after retirement for years and years. There's two paths to consider. One is probability and possibility. When you're in the military, the probability of being attacked by someone is higher, right? When you get out of the military, it's no longer probable, it's only possible. So you're living in the probable world. And anger and violence has its place in combat. It helps bring you home. Snap decisions, yelling at people, getting things done immediately, that works in combat. Now I come home and the dishes in the sink and the kids are running around screaming, and I start yelling and screaming because my muscle memory is to handle situations that way. And I didn't even know I was doing it. My body starts shaking. I'm not upset, but now I'm in the mode of control and to take charge. And anything chaotic like kids screaming, dirty dishes in the sink, or the house is a wreck, or Christmas or birthday parties. That's one thing that a lot or most veterans I've talked to tend to talk about. Why do I screw up holidays? Why am I always so angry? They need to take that path of, when you start to feel that, break that muscle memory and stop. And I used to start telling jokes. Me and my wife would be in an argument, and I would start telling a joke. And it's always good to tell her you're going to do it so she doesn't think you're making fun of her. So once she figured out what I was doing, it was, oh, I get what you're doing. You're trying to break the anger cycle. Tell a joke, just change the pathways and start over. And we did it, and then we would fail a couple of times, and we'd do it again and fail a couple of times. And then the more you do it, the less you fail, the more often you break that pattern, and the less often we're entering to that cycle of argument. So we're literally rewriting my brain and my thought process and breaking the muscle memory. I had done it so many thousands of times that it just comes natural. And that's where people are upset with themselves, that shame cycle. You lash out, you say something, you grab someone, and then you're sorry, and you immediately know it, and you back off, and then you go in the corner and you think about it, and then you feel horrible about yourself, and then it starts all over again. You just have to break that cycle.
Well, that's really interesting. I never really thought of it like that. That, you get these guys who've been, if you're in a firefight, if it's a life and death situation, you need to yell, you need to take control of the situation. You need to shout louder than everything else and snap them back to attention and take control of, what's going on. And it would only make sense that guys who have, strong leadership skills in that environment would still have that kind of trait in other environments, but it's not applicable to those environments and probably affects your life in a lot of different ways. The method you've come up with, this is really interesting. Now, did you get this from somewhere? Or is this something you developed, or how'd you come up with this method of retraining muscle memory?
My wife had done a lot of research, and she was looking into a lot of different things, and then she was asking me about our training. And before she was my wife, she was also videoing for us for after action reports when we were putting Green Berets and Navy SEALs through training. She would do the video, and she had never been associated or even knew about the military, what it was like, other than hearing something, so she was thrust into that world, and she started connecting it. She's learning the tactical side. She has the compassionate side. I'm seeing the compassionate side, and I know the tactical side. So we started blending together and telling our stories, and realized that we could create muscle memory in a different way. And we have to break the muscle memory of the violence and the screaming and the agitation. And the more research we did, we looked into it. Actually could take up to 10 years to recover from complex PTS. So if you think about 10 years, 20 years in the military, maybe. It takes 10 years to come down from that if it's complex, and depending on how hard you work on it. And I kept going to different facilities, hearing about different modalities of treatment for PTS and trying those out, along with emotionally focused therapy, which is what we use in our foundation with our counselor, who we started seeing, and she was amazing. Probably the fourth counselor we had gone to that we stopped. We finally found one we liked, and we ended up hiring her for our foundation. So she uses emotionally focused therapy, and it kind of turns emotions into actions. Like, take that sadness or that anger and sit it in that chair over there. Now, what do you want to tell it? And when I started, I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm rolling my eyes in my head, and my wife's over there watching me like, what am I going to do in this room? And I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try it. I'm going to give it my all and try it instead of making fun of it. And I started trying it, and I realized how quickly I was breaking the cycle, how I was becoming aware of my emotional patterns, and I was able to feel them come on and stop them. Does it start in your chest? Does it start in your stomach? Is it a thought in your head? Where does that nervousness start? And once you become aware of yourself and focus on the start of it, you can stop it quicker than getting into that argument and then upsetting your partner. And then now both of you are in that cycle of trying to be right or trying to win the argument versus what are we really arguing about and why are we arguing? So I break the pattern early, up to a point where it even starts less and less. Before I even get angry, I'll think of something, and then we'll be driving down the road, and I would get upset at something, and I would calm myself down. And I would look at my wife, and I would tell her, I literally almost yelled at you for nothing because I don't know what you did. I just got upset, and I stopped myself. She's like, all right, now we're making progress. Now, before you say something stupid, you're thinking. I'm like, I know. It took that long to get there, but it takes a lot of training, and just like learning to shoot or run or be better at anything.
Interesting. Well, I'd imagine too. There's a difference between recognizing that you have an issue and dealing with it, like taking medication. And a lot of guys, drink or try to just, I don't know, go out and hang out with their friends. Like you said, this kind of warrior lifestyle where they're kind of probably making bad decisions, but going out and partying or something like that, versus actually healing. In other words, there's a difference between coping, where you recognize you have a problem and you're just coping with it, and you just think, I can deal with this myself. I don't need help, versus actually taking the steps to heal. Can you talk to us, what's your thoughts about the difference between coping and healing?
I think the difference would be realization and awareness. Coping is what I did my entire career. Drinking, hanging out with the friends, not going home, just being at work where I felt comfortable with my weapons, my kit, my friends, people that understood what we had gone through. So I'm destroying all of my marriages. I'm destroying my family relationships, and I'm just staying at work. So I'm coping. Healing is when you have the realization and awareness that it's no longer needed, or the realization that I fought for this country for people's rights and so they could live happy and have fun. Why can't I live happy and have fun? Feel deserving. Sure, I lost a lot of friends. There's a lot of guilt there, but I tell myself my friends wouldn't want me living miserably the rest of my life. They wouldn't want their sacrifices gone to waste and for me to just suffer daily thinking about them all the time. They would want me to get out and be happy and live happily. So getting these people to understand that they deserve to live that way, to realize that they're only coping, and to admit that it's okay. It's a biological response to something you've seen and done, so it's not a mental illness. It's not a disorder as such. We don't like to call it PTSD. We like to call it PTS, or occupational stress injury. I don't care what you call it. So we've totally changed that when we speak about it.
I know part of your work too, you work with spouses to help husbands, or I guess wives, maybe even these days.
Right. That's a tough one.
Get help. Yeah. I mean, how do you work with the spouses as well?
We work with the spouses. We keep the spouse and the veteran or the active duty service member together, and we talk to them about the triggers that set the veteran off. What triggers set the veteran off, which means the veteran has to learn awareness. What is it that sets you off? Why do you get angry? Instead of why am I always angry? Okay, good. Now, why do you get angry? Talk about the specific moment. Now break it down. If you do that with the spouse, she understands what the husband, their veteran's going through. And when they understand it, they can be more compassionate about maybe what they say or what they do. And we also work with a veteran to be compassionate and be empathetic towards a spouse and the things that they've been doing at home and dealing with, because they both live under stress. They both want the same thing. They're both saying the same story. We just want to live together happily and feel connected. And when they don't feel connected, that's when almost all of us get into arguments or feel depressed, is when we don't feel connected to either what we love or something or a tribe. When we feel disconnected, we start getting down and depressed, and then that cycle starts. So we create that awareness, and then we give them touch points to work on, and then we give them topics and words to use in those conversations. And then, like during retreats that we have, everything we do is let's say a course. So even if we're having dinner and it's a nice setting and we're having a great time, everybody still pass around and we'll play like the newlywed game. Just how well do you know your spouse? And you'd be amazed that people that are together 25, 30 years don't know anything about each other because they've never sat down and talked. They're just living together, doing their daily lives, and they don't really get to know each other. So we help them reconnect. We love all the organizations out there that do things for veterans. And that's what we started as a resource library, just to help veterans find help. When my wife was trying to get me help, it was hard for her to find anything. So we started compiling different sites together, and that was our original idea. We'll just help people get help. And then we decided that we had enough knowledge that we could actually start helping people as well. And we just, you're on the phone all day long and all night, day in and out, and on weekends as well. And you're talking to veterans and spouses. And everybody wants to work on their relationship. Help me with my relationship, my failing marriage. I'm horrible to my wife and kids. So when you help a veteran, you send them home, or you send them hunting trip, or you send them to Disneyland. That's great. Thank you for your service. When they go home, the problems are still there. If you're a general in the Army or a private in the Army, or if you're a CEO or you work in the mailroom, when you go home, you're just somebody's spouse, and they don't care who you are or what you do. They're going to yell at you. They want you to do stuff. They want you to play with the kids. They want you to clean the house. And all that seems like an attack to a lot of us. So if you build a bigger foundation with the spouse and the veteran, they have a better chance of healing and working it out in the long run.
I know one of the things a lot of guys struggle with is, I think, the loss of a sense of brotherhood, and also I think real boredom, and also feeling like they no longer have like a mission, right? They no longer have a meaning. How do you help guys who are going through these things?
I help them. I help talk them through. A lot of them call, just miss it. Usually they're drinking. You could tell after a couple of minutes on the call that, okay, they're drinking, or after an hour, they're getting worse, and as long as they're not going down a depressive state, I just let them talk. And it goes into bawling and crying, and then back to, I miss it. I just miss it so much. And I'm like, why do you miss it? Well, we lost so-and-so, and then that one mission, you're talking about a lot of bad stuff. Why do you miss it? And it ends up being they don't have anything to do, or they can't focus on anything to do because they're focused on the past. So I tell them, why are you looking in the rearview mirror? Why are you reliving that last high school football touchdown throw you made, or that catch you made, and that was your heyday? All right, so I was in Delta. Great. That was what I did. It was a job. I don't live there anymore. I take those experiences and I apply them to what I'm doing now. But I don't live in the past. I use from the past what I need to live in the now, because that's all we can affect, to help me plan for the future. So I try to get their heads out of the past. And then they're like, well, what do? I don't know what to do. I don't have any skills. Well, I guess it's time to go back to school then, if you don't have any skills. If you were just in for 4 years and you get out, you didn't really get that many skills while you were in the military. You didn't learn a lot of leadership. You learned how to carry a weapon and be told what to do. And some people need that a lot. But so after 4 years, you get out, and now you're a veteran. Yeah, you don't know what to do. You do what everyone else does. Go to school. Find your mission or create a mission. Or what is your passion? One guy, he's teaching music and making music, but he could play all kinds of instruments, but he didn't want to do it because he thought it was a sissy thing to do. And I'm like, why would music be a sissy thing to do? Well, all the guys made fun of me. Well, they're no longer here. And if it's your passion, why would you not do that? So he's turned that into a job. He's happy making money doing what he loves to do. And so that's really not even a job for him. But we tell him, pull your head out of the past, focus on now so you can prepare for the future.
Right. As a guy who's pulled yourself out of a lot of the I mean, I assume, right? You've pulled yourself out of a lot of the symptoms of PTSD. Looking back at it and what you went through, and being, in other words, having that contrast where you know what you were in, you can look back and see it versus where you are now. What would you say PTSD does to a person?
I think it is a false sense of unworthiness. My whole career, I felt not good enough. I felt like I wasn't as good as the people around me. So I dug in and I worked harder and harder and harder. And many times I was sitting around different rooms, like in Iraq, talking to generals from the unit and different sergeant majors, and they all felt the same way. Nobody felt good enough. So we all just stuck our nose down and got to work. Well, that's good in getting better at something, but it's destructive to your soul because you never feel good enough. So we get out. And there's really not a competition. Some guys get out and they feel better than everybody. Yeah, I was, hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, I was in Delta, or I was a Green Beret. No, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, I was a Green Beret, Well, okay, great. You said that. What do you do now? So they stop and they think, well, they come to realize that what they used to do mattered then. It doesn't really matter so much to the civilians out here who don't even know about it, really. And so it's confusing that you go from, say, pro football players. They go through a lot of the same things. So they get TBI as well too, and they go through that and they get out. And then you see pro football players or pro baseball or any pro athlete living under a bridge somewhere. They blew all their money. They don't feel worthy. They're not part of that tribe, so they've lost that worthiness, and they just stop. I say a lot: the greatest failure is the failure to try, because if you fail and you stop, that's as far as you'll ever get. If you fail and you try again, sooner or later you're not going to fail, and you're going to complete that. It's that mindset of, what are you going to do? Take the same attitude you had when you were in the military doing the job you loved and apply it now to something else. So it's all mindset. And again, once you pull them out of the past and that thought of, I'm no longer that, poor me, just get started again.
Interesting. Well, this is interesting because in a lot of forms of therapy, there are similar concepts. And in fact, we just had a woman on yesterday. She's a pediatrician. She works with kids, and she was talking about how parents sometimes, you have to be careful about what you build your child's self-identity around, and not comparing, our troops to kids, but, really we all go through the same things. But sometimes you build your identity around something, and when that thing comes to an end, it's almost like your whole identity ends with it. And for kids, you can see it real clear in terms of their onset depression and feeling like they lost what they were all about and having to kind of find themselves again. Like you said, football players, you see a lot of guys who kind of still live like, they're 40 and they're still living in their 20s because that's when they were cool and that's when they had all their friends and they were popular, and now they feel like they're not, say, changing and they're not doing anything new. They're not accomplishing, almost like they've left behind the best part of their lives and they're not looking forward. How do you help guys kind of find new meaning? How do you help them change what they're basing their identity on?
I dig into their mind and just through a lot of questions about, what is it you like to do? What is it you want to do? And if they keep talking about, well, it's just all I love to do, I'm like, well, why'd you get out? Why did you get out? Let's talk about how horrible the military can be. Let's talk about the bad nights where it's raining all night and it's freezing. I remind them that it also was a horrible thing to do. Kind of just talking them through their skill sets. And a lot of it is confidence. Honestly, some of the most competent people I know are some of the least confident in themselves. And it's a struggle for them to get up and do the job that they do daily. Even though they do it well, it's a struggle for them to get up and do it daily. So I tell them that, if you take that same attitude towards everything else you do, right? And your identity is what you make it. Your identity is what you're doing, right? It's what you make it. So if it was something, make it something else. Go through the same steps.
I've talked to some veterans, and like my grandfather, for example, who's in Vietnam, he told, one of the things he told me was that when you're in war, of course, you go through a lot of very difficult things. I won't go into all of it. But he said there's also a simplicity to it, right? There's a simplicity to it. And when you're in it for a long time, you start to really like that simplicity. And when you come back to, civilian life, it's very complicated. There's a lot more you have to think about, a lot more you have to deal with. And going from that simple environment to a very a different, I guess maybe a different kind of complicated environment, I guess you could say, that has a lot less appreciation maybe in terms of what you feel you deserve, or, you know, a lot less respect than maybe what you feel you deserve. It's a very difficult transition. And, you know, he said when his best friend never came back, you know, when the war ended, he just decided to stay there. And a lot of guys did that, actually. Then, even though the war was over, they couldn't leave it. And I think that's actually pretty symbolic when you think about it, you know.
And it happens to this day. There's guys that I would have rather been at work back in the day than to go home and deal with family. Early on, I would have rather stayed in the military than got out and dealt with civilian world, because every person in the civilian world is different. So everything's a change. You can't come to an agreement on anything. In the military, you're all kind of like-minded. So like on a sports team, they hang around each other, they go out together, they're all like-minded. So it's easy to say something and everybody gets it. You know, it's like go to a party somewhere in St. Louis after 25 years in the Army and tell a joke, and everybody in the room looks at you like, what? You're like, oh, that's not normal to say. You know, that's not, I guess I'm in the wrong room. So it's the realization of who you're around anymore. And that once it sets in that none of these people get me and I don't get them, and every one of them are different. And I'm used to being around similar people. You know, you become like the 5 people you hang around the most. So when you're in the service and everyone's like-minded, you can look at it. You can talk to veterans and you can tell when they're in a group talking. The same with probably lawyers and doctors. You can pick up on it if you listen long enough, that they all become like each other. So that's when I decided to start hanging around more influential people, higher thinkers, civilians. You know, when I got to St. Louis and forced myself out of my comfort zone, instead of hiding out at home and only going out to dark restaurants and bars and hanging out. You know, with my wife, I started stepping out and hanging out with a higher class, if you will, to force myself out of my comfort zone to become more like the people I hang around. And what you're doing is just learning from people. You know, you're learning from everybody you are around all the time. So I chose to surround myself with people better than me, just like I did in the military, surround myself with people smarter than me so I look good and get things done fast. And, you know, that's just how life has worked out for me. And so I decided finally to apply it to my retirement and hang around a higher level of people. And then you find that the compassion levels of those people at that level are pretty high, and their empathy levels are pretty high. So you kind of take on that role as well.
In other words, finding kind of a new circle that you can become part of.
It really struck me when my wife and I went back to Fort Bragg after living in St. Louis here for 4 years and being out of the Army for probably 5 or 6 at the time. Went back to Fort Bragg and we went to a bar and we're hanging out, and some friends showed up, and the racial comments, the jokes, you know, the womenizing, and even the music they're listening to, all the metal, you know, it's just get your head right before you go to war kind of music. And I'm thinking, we're in a bar, at a restaurant bar. And it was a big turnoff for me after being around a different type of people. And I talk about it when I do speaking engagements about how I realized I was hanging around, even though they were my friends, I was hanging around the wrong type of people. And that's when I started shifting to hanging around different people. Therefore, I was changing and emulating who I was hanging around versus emulating, you know, the negative path. Who are the top 5 people you hang around the most? Think about it. Are they your friends, and why are they your friends? And do they make good, legal, moral, and ethical decisions? So you'll also do the same thing, because you always support each other in a group. Even seemingly when people do wrong things in a group, people will support it in that group because they feel complicit, if you will, to it.
Of course, I know that there are probably a lot of guys too who think I don't have a problem, I don't have PTSD, but I know that there's a process of assessment where you need to look at your life and really think, do I have a problem, and is it negatively affecting my life? What is that process of actually stopping and taking an assessment?
Well, like, ask yourself, how is my life? A lot of people give advice and people take it. I'm like, I would never take advice from somebody I would not change places with, just like I wouldn't take financial advice from somebody that, you know, I make more money than or whatever, because I don't make that much anyway. So it's like, who do you take advice from and who do you listen to? And then look at yourself. How is your life? Is your relationship great? I mean, and are you the only one that thinks it's great? Does your spouse think it's great as well? You know, how's your relationship with your children? Do you get down on the floor and play with them? A lot of veterans have trouble getting down on the floor and connecting with their children. They just can't do the play thing. They'll sit in the room with them and they'll watch them and they love them, but getting on the floor and hands on. So how healthy is your relationship? How healthy is your career? Are you happy with what you're doing? Do you make enough money? So, and then what's holding you back? Are you drinking too much? Are you taking drugs? Are you trying to hide something? So I would have them look at their life and say, what was the happiest point of your life? What was it? Well, it was when I was working here. We were doing this and that, but why? Well, probably because you were healthy. You were eating right. You were focused on a job and you were being professional about it. And now you're not eating healthy. You're not exercising. You don't really have a focus and you don't really know what to do with that. Yeah, you're lost. So you probably have something wrong with you. If you want to call it PTSD, depression, stress, doesn't matter. If you're a veteran and you've gone through that, and most of us have either been deployed long enough that you've been removed from your families, or you've seen or have friends that have been killed or committed suicide, we're all affected, and it all affects us differently. So they have to ask themselves, and I tell them, just sit down, assess your life. Are you where you want to be? Are you happy with it? By the way, ask your spouse, are they happy? Is it not just your opinion that you're happy, or is it both your opinions that your relationship's good? So some people are excellent. And then also some people are excellent and never say a word and they kill themselves one night. It's the strong, silent ones that scare me the most. The ones that ask for help are easy. The ones that don't, those are the scary ones.
I know you have a pretty good relationship with your wife now, at least it seems, based on the work you do together. But, of course, you mentioned the problems you've had with your relationships or marriages in the past, and also the difficulty you even had with your children in the past. Looking at where you're at now and where you were before, how would you contrast the difference in your relationships after working on these parts of yourself?
My difference now is I would fight for my relationship now. My relationship with my wife is my number one thing in my life. Before, I used to say that. I didn't mean it. My number one thing was my work, my job. I lost 3 wives to my job, and I didn't bat an eye. I literally didn't even look back. And it didn't bother me. I mean, of course it bothers me at the time, but I look back now and I'm like, wow, I didn't have any effort. I didn't have any energy for my relationship. I was just there. All I wanted to do was go back to work. Everything I did was to get enough rest to go back to work. And now everything I do is for my relationship, for my health and for her health and our family. So that's my number one focus in life. My second focus is the foundation to help people. And so it's my priorities in life that I've reevaluated, what was important to me at the time. And again, think about CEOs, right? They work long hours. I mean, good CEOs that make a lot of money for large corporations, they're gone all the time. They work late hours. They probably work weekends and they don't really go home a lot. And when they do, they're probably not there. They're probably on the phone working. So they retire and they get done. They're going to go through the same thing, that reconnection, that what is more important in your life, not what you say, not with your words, but your actions. What is most important in your life?
Right. And I guess, Tom, just last question. If you were to give one message to people from your book or from the work you do, what do you hope people take away from this?
I would hope that people could take away that they're not alone. There's nothing I haven't heard that would shock me anymore. There's nothing that makes me think anybody is any different than the rest of us, other than the fact that the story that got them there. So stop hiding. Stop, I guess, abusing yourself by hiding and not admitting that it affects you too, right? So to a person, everyone I talk to, when they finally open up, says the same thing. So glad I finally started talking about it, but it was just hard to start, right? Everybody, I'll work out tomorrow, I'll go on my diet Monday or the new year, or just start it, right? It's that easy. Just do it. Just start. I don't want to steal that tagline. So just start the process of getting help. And I guarantee that they'll thank whoever helps them later.
Great. And so, Tom, where can people find your book?
They can find it at allsecurefoundation.org. We sell it on our website, and they can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And I think we're in a lot of local bookstores as well, too. So if you just Google All Secure, the book, it pops up as well with multiple different locations to find it.
Also, where can they find your organization as well?
Yeah, allsecuredfoundation.org. And on there, we also have a secondary platform called Virago that Jen started just for the wives, not just spouses, but just female, the wives of combat veterans, to understand and share stories as to the wives that are in hiding. They can't go out and get help because their husbands don't want them to, because they're afraid of what it'll look like. So it's kind of like a little secret community, if you will, that they can share the stories and get help that they need.
Quick note on that too. A lot of guys' lives are saved by their wives, actually.
Absolutely. They are our rock. They see what's wrong with us, whether we admit it or not. They can see it.
Great. Hey, Tom, really appreciate being on the show. Real pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Everyone, please remember to like and subscribe. Click that notification bell. See you next time.